Okay, and we are set to record in 8K RAW and speed. This looks amazing. Oh wait, it's overheated. Okay, everyone just hold for 30 minutes. We're just gonna let the camera cool down and then we'll get right back to it. Just nobody move, okay? Nobody move. How's it going, everyone? David from dodmedia. This is obviously not the Canon R5. This is my old 6D body, but I thought I would use it as a prop to initiate throwing my 2 cents in that nobody asked for about the R5 announcement. Now, chances are you already know what all of the specs of the R5 are and that you are pouring through YouTube videos just hoping to get a glimpse at something that someone hasn't said is news to you. This isn't that video. But what I am going to do is filter down that announcement with all of the specs and just look at what is actually relevant to filmmakers and photographers, in my opinion, based on what everyone is asking for out of a camera these days. So first of all, you've got 8K RAW up to 30 frames a second video. Then you've got 4K 120 frames per second 10-bit. Fantastic. You've also got a full 8K readout of that 8K sensor downsampled to 4K, which means there is no pixel binning, no line skipping. So that is gonna look phenomenal. That is going to look like such good 4K. Even though 4K already looks good, it's going to look really good. And then finally, based on the images I've seen, you've got a really, really clean 45 megapixel sensor, even at higher ISO ratings, which is fairly uncommon, and it's only due to the very powerful processor in the R5 that you're able to push that resolution up to a higher ISO and still get a nice image. And it's those few things that I just listed which made me think, wow, Canon, well done. I wouldn't be lying if I said that I was basically ritually disappointed by Canon over the last 11 years. Every time they brought out a new camera in the 5D range, I was always thinking, right, are they gonna incorporate things that they would normally incorporate in their professional camera line, professional video camera line, I should specify, into their photography camera line that can do video? And every time the answer was, they kind of do, but not really, because they don't want to disincentivize you from buying a professional video camera from them. And that disappointment, that ritual disappointment with Canon products was what eventually drove me to change to Sony, which is what I'm filming on right now with that gorgeous anamorphic lens. Oh yeah. And so I am very, very glad for Canon users that Canon is finally actually catching up and meeting demand of their customers and not just what they ideally think should go in a photography camera versus what should be kept for a professional video camera. So looking at those things that I listed about 8K, about 4K downsampled from 8K, about 4K 120 10-bit, there are a few things that you need to know if you don't know them already. First of all, the 8K RAW is going to give you a recording time of about 20 minutes, they say, before the camera overheats. Everyone is going nuts about this because they're saying it's unacceptable. I don't know if any of you know, but when the Red 1 camera came out, it could film for about, I think we got about 5 minutes out of it before it overheated. So when you consider that you can record up to 20 minutes in one go, that's pretty good. It's pretty rare, I would say, for a film set to shoot continuously for 20 minutes. But at the end of the day, even if they are shooting for more than that, this is a tool. This isn't going to make your movie. It's going to capture it, but it's not going to make your movie. What's going to make your movie is the actual organization and production that goes behind it, not the tool that you shot it on. So if you need to do takes that are longer than 20 minutes, this is not the camera for you. End of story. If you need to record corporate interviews, this is not the camera for you. End of story. Now, for me personally, 8K is entirely unnecessary to my work. Even the stuff that I shoot in 6K on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, I downscale to 4K. So right now, my business is very much geared towards 4K, but that doesn't mean that in 2 years' time, I might not start thinking about upscaling to higher resolution delivery formats like 6K or even 8K. But for me right now, 4K, that's where the money's at. And that's where this camera is really interesting. So as I mentioned, it has a couple of ways of shooting in 4K. The first way, which I find amazing, is that it can take that full 8K sensor and squish it down to 4 times smaller to a 4K sensor or a 4K resolution. And that is going to look incredible because it's not skipping any lines, it's not binning any pixels. So just the level of detail in that 4K image is going to be insane. But then you're still running into the issue of using that whole sensor and having to downscale it, which means that your camera is going to run for about half an hour before it overheats and needs to cool down again. So again, make sure you consider that if you're thinking of getting this to record interviews in this beautiful crisp 4K, because it's not going to work for you. But if you can make it work within your needs, it's going to look phenomenal. Then the next way of shooting the 4K is it does actually use pixel binning. It uses a 2:2 ratio for pixel binning so that it can downscale that 4K with a fairly low signal to noise ratio, which means you'll get a nice clean image at a 4K 10-bit 120 frames per second feed. That's nuts. And I know that the A7S III has been announced to be able to do the same thing, although it's not been released yet at this time of making this video, so no one really knows for sure. But being able to shoot 4K 120 frames per second 10-bit is huge. And I was a little bit worried about a 2:2 pixel binning ratio because I was worried that it would introduce possible things like moire or obvious aliasing in straight lines or diagonal lines or patterns on people's tops. But from the previews that I've seen, I've not seen any of that. And to me, all of this is a sign that Canon are willing to be a little bit more experimental with their photography-oriented cameras. They are willing to add a little bit more of the pro features from video into these mirrorless cameras, which is great. They're keeping up with the times, finally. Another aspect which I think is really interesting, which I've been looking forward to using on the Sigma FP camera actually, is the raw HDMI out. So basically your camera just becomes a sensor that outputs a ton of data through HDMI, and then a field recorder like the Ninja 5 that this is recording on now, or if you've got a Blackmagic recorder, that will convert that into a ProRes RAW or a B-roll format so that you can use a raw compressed format that will work beautifully in a nonlinear editor while retaining all of that color information and that light information. And the fact that Canon have kind of hinted or even semi-promised of firmware updates where they'll be able to add new features like 4K RAW, for example, again, that's really promising for Canon to be able to commit to actually listening to what their customers want and delivering it, which is something I just don't feel like they've done for the last 12 years. Now, does that mean that I'll be investing in the Canon R5 myself? Probably not, because I don't want to have to merge over to a whole new R ecosystem. I've invested in Sony. I have Sony lenses, and where I need RAW, I have my Sigma FP, which can shoot full-frame 12-bit DNG RAWs, and I also have the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, which can shoot in 6K B-RAW. So I'm kind of covered. I feel like I'm kind of covered. I think. Maybe. I'm not sure. No, I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure I'm covered. Again, as I say, it's a tool, and currently all of my tools work for me. I don't need to have to change my entire toolbox just to do the same thing. Anyway, that's it from me. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you like this anamorphic occasional flaring going on there. Very nice. This is actually a new lens which is under wraps for the moment. This is the first time I'm using it in something that is showing publicly, but I'll be doing a review of it very soon. Let me know in the comments if you learned anything in this video, if there was anything about the specifics of the specs that you didn't know, like which ones were pixel binning, which ones were full downscales. And yeah, hit that thumbs up if you liked this video. Give it a thumbs up. I just said that. Hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.